Hello, LBC used to be a pretty good radio station, but, well, they've gone the James O'Brien route, haven't they? And we've got Andrew Marr here, who seems to be permanently attached to Keir Starmer, in at least politically. Like, you know, those unfortunate Siamese twins who were joined at the head. OK, well, I'm going to be playing part of one of Andrew Marr's shows, and I'm going to be disagreeing with him most of the time. For all of you people who don't like the presenter, i.e. me, to interrupt the clip, look, if you want to see the clip in entirety, just go online and find it. In fact, I'll leave the link in the description. Will that satisfy you? But I shall have to interrupt it for two reasons. First of all, because I want to talk about what he says when he says it. And secondly, there might be a copyright issue. Now, usually I cut out the sound with somebody else's show like this, but I have to play the sound, so it might mean I'm going to get a copyright strike on this. You never can tell with YouTube, but I'm hoping that by interrupting it frequently, that might avoid that sort of thing from happening. If I do get a copyright strike, then I will have done this for no financial gain, because LBC will get whatever this video earns. Which, yeah, that's the way the dice fall, you see. But I've got to talk about what Andrew Marr is saying. So let's get on with it. I'm Granniopteryx. Please like this video. Please share it. Please share it. Andrew Marr really needs calling out on this. Please subscribe to my channel. Check you're still subscribed. If you're on YouTube, sometimes that's not a given. You can contribute to my, well, not my financial well-being, but the well-being of my horses. I have to say, one of them I ride, so I get lots of pleasure and joy out of that horse. I don't need to be paid for riding that horse. But the other one is a rescue. I just rescued her from someone who was neglecting her. And so she's sort of expensive and does nothing. So it's always useful to have a little extra to handle those. Right. Yeah. OK. All right. Let's hear what Andrew Marr has to say. All determined and purposeful.
Good evening. Let's keep talking about how to defend this country properly against our enemies.
Right, let's start with that. How to defend our country against our enemies. First of all, perhaps we should define who our enemies are, shouldn't we? Like, for instance, there is an army of young fighting age men from a sort of culture that wishes to change the laws of this land to the laws of the land they are purporting to have run from. And they are embedded in our society now. Now, they not only form a possible fighting force, internal fighting force, they are also draining our resources. Millions of pounds a day being spent on housing and feeding them, and also imprisoning them when the police do get round to imprisoning people, because they tend not to be the most law-abiding of characters. Not all, but by and large. So Andrew Marr is talking about protecting us from our enemies, but he is not defining who that enemy might be, is he? And what, in fact, he's doing is the classic magician's trick, isn't it? Don't look there, look here. You know, here's my charming assistant in the revealing swimsuit, yeah, while I fiddle with something else over here that you're not watching. And that seems to me to be very much what the Labour government is doing right now and how Andrew Marr is pushing that narrative. So we don't think of the other narrative. Does he think that we really don't think of the other narrative?
Yesterday, I argued that the Strategic Defence Review was essentially all about credibility.
Keir Starmer vows to make Britain battle-ready as he unveils defence spending plans. So, you see, what happens is that the government goes into hyperdrive manufacturing arms. This will tend to increase the, employment and just the kickstart industry. So it's a technique used by tyrants all over the place throughout history. You build up an arms industry and people feel like the economy's moving. Then, of course, you have to find a war to fight. That's another matter.
The Russians and others that we were too dangerous to attack.
No, too dangerous to attack. Look, we're a small island, a couple of well-placed nuclear devices in this country, and we will be finished anyway. We are not too dangerous to attack. NATO is too dangerous to attack. We have to keep NATO going. That's something else. And Britain cannot drag all of NATO ahead along with it. And the problem is that the other countries don't want to contribute. So it's all very well Mr. Marr and Sir Keir. And people say, don't call him Sir Keir. Unfortunately, that's his title. But I prefer to think of the spelling of Sir as C-U-R. Maybe that'll help you along. Anyway, they seem all purposeful. Here, look, Andrew Marr's looking purposeful. Sir Keir is looking purposeful. We've got to be strong. Meanwhile, we have a fifth column inside our country. Look, even if those migrants do not start attacking us when we are being attacked from the outside, they are not going to join the army and fight for us either, are they? They are just going to be a drag on our ability to fight. If we had to fight with all those migrants here, it would be exactly like fighting with one arm tied behind our backs. And he's not talking about that, is he? Of course he isn't.
I spoke to Lord George Robertson, co-author of the review, and although his words were guarded, I think it's clear enough what he really thinks.
Well, it isn't actually. But why doesn't he say what Lord George Robertson actually thinks? Why is he skirting the issue? So, encouraging us to think along certain lines while not exactly saying this. Why is he doing that? Well, that's because he's talking a load of waffle.
If the people of this country want an insurance policy, want to be...
I'm sorry. The people of this country want a government they can trust. And at the moment, they don't trust it. It so happens, I just heard a report that whereas enrolment in the army in the USA was down during Biden's time, it's going up now that Trump is in charge. That's because the young people feel that they will be fighting for a government they trust.
They want to make sure that their children in the future are going to be safe, then tough to...
Again, he's talking about their children, the British people, their children and the future. Well, those young men I was talking about, the migrants that we're supporting, they have no future in this country. They have no children. So they will not be fighting for a future. Meanwhile, there are British people here who have recently learnt that by 2050, white British will be in a minority in this country.
At the NATO summit, a lot of countries round the table are going to be saying if we're going to get to 2% or 3% or, the reputed 3.5%, then a lot of social programmes may well have to go. But if we're going to be safe and we're not going to have the lights turned off, then people will have to pay.
People are paying. We are paying, when we pay our taxes, we are paying for an NHS that will keep us healthy. We are paying for pensions that will buffer the effects of old age. Look, most people, they ring up the doctor and discover that there's no appointments for another 2 weeks. The situation is groaning at the seams, and we could be on the same tax levels and with a better working NHS if we just removed all of those migrants, if we just sent our Navy out to turn the boats back. Because the Navy is there to protect us, and that's not what it's doing at the moment. And of course, it's not doing that, not because the Navy is at fault, but because this guy is at fault.
Starmer says he doesn't want to engage in the fantasy politics of promising things he can't fund.
Yeah, well, we can't fund the migrants, but we are funding them anyway, and we're funding them at the expense of the ordinary British taxpayer.
But he also said recently there were discussions about what Britain's contribution should be ahead of that NATO conference taking place in The Hague shortly. And that, I thought, was a cautious nod to the unavoidable reality that NATO really wants us to spend even more.
We could afford more if we weren't paying our money on other things. Well, for instance, the Chagos Islands. Now, we could save a lot of money by not giving the Chagos Islands to the Mauritians, which is going to cost us. We give them the Chagos Islands and then we pay them for the privilege. Or is it £100 million a year? Well, that might go towards paying for a couple of tanks, mightn't it?
Now, given how much emphasis Keir Starmer's put on NATO, it's hard to imagine him, isn't it, just saying, sorry, can't. That means that right now, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has a big new headache. How to find that extra cash.
Oh, come on. That's really simple. I mean, she could just invent it, like she's invented everything else. Starmer talks about fantasy worlds. His whole government is based on fantasy world. There's only one answer. The answer is simple. We have to remove the drains on our society. And at the moment, those drains are enormous, not only in finances, but in social upheaval, dislocation, pain and suffering. And you're not going to you can spend as much as you want, but if you don't have the soldiers, it's not much use. You can't throw pound notes, or rather pound coins, at an enemy. You've got to have soldiers. And who wants to fight for this guy? Now, the people who support this guy, well, they'd wave Palestine flags. They wouldn't sign up.
Extra borrowing for defence, Lord Hayne believes, could be made possible by issuing a defence bond.
And that is absolutely a defence bond. OK, I would rather buy a bridge from a dodgy bloke with a turned-up collar than a defence bond from this guy. What, I think, talking about Fantasyland, what universe does Andrew Marr inhabit that he thinks people are actually going to put their money down to buy defence bonds from this government? He's trying to pretend that we are on a war footing now and all patriotism. It's amazing how patriotism comes up when it's convenient, isn't it?
To make that happen, he said, the Chancellor would need to break free from Treasury orthodoxy. Let's start tonight with somebody who knows all about hard calls at the top of government, the former Permanent Secretary at the Foreign Office, Lord Simon Macdonald. These are the kind of pressures, auntie, that Labour, any British Prime Minister can't completely ignore.
Correct. But two key first points. One is that the pressure will be general within the alliance, particularly among the European allies. It's not just going to be the United Kingdom that is asked to do more.
Now, as a former serving soldier yourself, can you just first of all explain to people listening why spending more money on accommodation for the army is so important?
It's absolutely huge. And it's not just accommodation we're spending more money on.
OK, so now they're talking about accommodation for the British Army. There are some hotels available, I believe, if they could move the present residents out of there, aren't there? Oh, look, I'm going to stop here. I think we've heard enough. This is... Just to finish off, we have people like Andrew Marr talking about the fact that we are unprepared for war. And we have Keir Starmer talking about preparing for war. And I find this very worrying because it is the standard technique of any tyrant to create an enemy and then to gear a country up on a war footing, which allows the robbing of personal freedoms and all sorts of restrictions on freedom of speech, which the Labour government are quite happy with, but they have to have a reason for. So I'm finding all of this extremely disturbing. And Andrew Marr is just one of the people pumping this line. It's true, we should make sure that our country is safe and protected. But we can't do that when we are spending our money on looking after the whole world that's coming in and expecting handouts from us. And, by the way, possibly forming an army within our society. Even legitimate migrants from certain parts of the world have been known to act quite badly. But then there are so many illegal ones that we really don't know anything about, and they are embedded in our society. And people like Andrew Marr are talking about the possibility of war between us and Russia. That's not going to happen. Little as I like Russia, that is not going to happen. So it's a cooked up... It's a cooked up diversion. And this is extremely worrying. OK, well, don't say I didn't warn you. Till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.